The body of a priest, Father Joseph Walsh, was found nearby, and he was shot in the
Gardaí
head.
called on O'Donnell to surrender, but he grabbed the woman with the rifle to her head and threatened to blow her
Their
head
bodies,
off.
he said, were found intertwined in a County Clare wood. These were the cold, calculated and well thought out acts of Brendan O'Donnell.
A .22 rifle at point blank range, you had absolutely no chance of survival. At that time, it was said to be the worst crime that had ever happened by one single individual in any part of the country. The whole sequence of events is terrifying. First day of being a Garda, I joined the Guards on the 7th of May 1975.
7th of May as well?
7th of May as well.
Jesus, that's creepy.
Isn't that just? And it was 19 years later, my 19th anniversary in the Guards, that I was involved in the arresting of Brendan O'Donnell. Coming towards the end of April of '94, there was a gentleman by the name of Brendan O'Donnell who had a reputation of being a total bully and just terrifying before and behind him. We got word at the end of April that a lady and her 3-year-old son from the Whitegate area was gone missing. And then on the evening of the 5th of May, Father Joe Walsh, the curate in Aircourt, hadn't been seen for the past 24 hours. Then the alarm bells really started ringing and there was an all-out search. Brendan O'Donnell was the #1 and only suspect. On the morning of the 7th of May, Fiona Sampson, a young lady from Whitegate, was kidnapped by O'Donnell at her own home. The father tried to stop it. He actually hit the windscreen of the car as they drove out. But at gunpoint, she was told to stay driving. This is the route that he took on that morning, forcing the lady he kidnapped to drive all of this time. She was a 17-year-old lady. He had her from about 5 to 8 in the morning until we arrested him at about 10 past 10. All of the time he had her at gunpoint. He was carrying a rifle, a .22 rifle. He tried to get Fiona to put on her mother's coat. He had this impression that it would be harder for the sensor on the helicopter to pick up people. In her effort to put on the coat while driving, having gone up that road approximately 1.5 miles, 2 miles, the car went in off of the road, in on a rampart, and they failed to get it out. They walked down this road. You can just imagine the hardship of walking on a freshly tarred road in your bare feet. She was walking in her bare feet, in across the mountain there. Parts of that mountain are pretty dangerous, and afterwards to see the state of her feet, it was unbelievable. She knew him and honestly thought that he wouldn't shoot her. But I don't have a doubt in my mind he would have shot her. It would have been too easy for her to identify him in subsequent proceedings, so that's why I'm convinced that he would have shot her. As we came down here, you were waiting to see him around every corner on the road, and eventually we came across him down a wee bit further here. This house here on the right is the house and the location where Brendan O'Donnell was arrested. I was driving the patrol car and I pulled it at an angle across the road just exactly where we are. He had a car stopped at gunpoint just on the corner of the road. And Fiona and himself were standing on the left as we looked down. He forced the car to stop, opened the back door, shoved her into the car, and he followed her in. Forced the driver of the car to come up and told him to ram us, but the driver didn't. He was an elderly man whose name was Edward Cleary, and Edward Cleary, in my opinion, saved Fiona Sampson's life. He came up along, and as he came up along, he was told to turn the car into this entrance here. And he kind of made about 5 attempts to turn the car, giving us a chance to get into position that we could effect an arrest. The gun was coming out between the 2 seats here. The driver of the car caught the barrel of the gun and wedged it against the headrest on the passenger seat. O'Donnell couldn't, try as he might, he couldn't take away the gun. So what did he do? He pulled the trigger. The bullet hit over the mirror and ricocheted the left-hand side into the pillar on the left. We came from this side here, around the back of the car, pulled open the back door and caught hold of him. We pulled him out of the car, and he was pulled out of the car. I went down on top of him, with my knees landing on his chest, pinned him to the ground, and he showed absolutely no emotion whatsoever. And the only thing he said was, "I did nothing wrong."
I know nothing about the woman and kid that are missing and being blamed the wrong. That's why the pressure's on me.
Fiona Sampson was taken from there. A guard put her up on his back and carried her up the road, and she was taken by helicopter to Loughrea. His 2 eyes were just mad in his head. That's the only way you could describe it, as being totally mad. Or maybe you should say bad. And he had 3 people murdered at that stage. And as far as he was concerned, another wouldn't have bothered him. And that's the kind of thing, I think, that upsets so many people even to this day. The rifle he was using was a rifle he stole from a house in Whitegate. And the amazing thing was he had 77 rounds of ammunition, and each round had been X'd. The top of the bullet was X'd so that when it would hit the person, it would shatter inside and do maximum damage. A .22 rifle at point blank range, you had absolutely no chance of survival. This is exactly what it looked like when the bodies of Father Joe Walsh, Imelda, and her son Liam were found. The way all the trees are just around us here, and that will give you an indication of what these graves look like that were spoken about by the media at the time. The Wharton graves is just a little scrape that was turned over, and there was a few branches like this one here thrown over the bodies to try and hide them. But there was no serious effort made on the part of O'Donnell to hide the bodies. Father Joe was shot through the brain. Imelda Riney was shot through the side of the head, and her son Liam was shot through his eye. This is the location where Father Joe Walsh was found on the 7th of May. He was found kneeling here and lying kind of over that stone. Father Walsh was one of those people, while a very public image, he was a very private person. He was a man I knew very well. We were very good friends. And to think that he was just taken out of it as easily as he was, just doesn't make sense to me. This is the location where Imelda and Liam were found. Imelda Riney was a mother, and Liam Riney was just a 3-year-old boy. What could he have ever done to deserve it? Whatever about the 2 adults that were murdered, what could a child of 3 years of age have ever done? You can hear, as we speak, the chimes in the background, and there were an awful lot more of those chimes here before the clear fell of the forestry, and it made a very, very eerie, weird kind of noise when you're here on your own. You come up to visit here, and I did that regularly, but not so much in the last few years, but in the first 15 years, I would say, it was nearly a place of pilgrimage on the 7th of May. We talked about the chimes. Well, you can see them here. The remains of some of the chimes are here hanging on the trees. Those sounds coming through the trees, I think, is what made people that visited here afterwards, that's what made them feel so bad about a mother, a child and a priest being murdered in a place like this. I have such, I suppose, it goes from being annoyed to being really angry, to being very, extremely vexed at him for what he did. Then it goes from that to just saying, you have to let it go. It's 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. You just don't hold those kind of grudges, because if you do, you're the one that suffers. He was just one of those individuals that was looking for notice and didn't care how he achieved that goal. The relief after he was arrested, the phone in my own house, people ringing, saying thanks, so on, and there was somewhere in the region of about 80 calls just saying thanks to the guards for the job that had been done on that morning. The trial started on the 15th of January 1996 and ended on the 3rd of April, I think it was. It was the longest single defendant trial in the history of the state. 2 of the jurors were so upset that they just broke down and cried and had to be escorted from court through a side entrance. Now, if it had that effect on 2 strangers that didn't know O'Donnell, the Rineys, or the Walshes, what way did that affect the victims' families? He was sentenced on the 15th of June of 1996. He was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment in Mountjoy. And he was taken from there to Mountjoy, but the following day he was sent from there to the Central Mental Hospital in Dundrum. And that's where he died a number of years later.
A post-mortem is to be carried out to establish the cause of death of the triple killer Brendan O'Donnell, whose body was discovered in a cell at Dublin's Central Mental Hospital in Dundrum this morning.
He died of natural causes. He was found dead in his cell. People say that this gentleman was mad. I have to disagree totally and say he was bad. And it is something I dislike saying, but the thought and the effort and everything else that went into what he did, to me, and I was there from beginning to end, was something that I think will stay with me for the rest of my life. And I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Evil. The only word I could use to describe Brendan O'Donnell, unfortunately, is evil in the extreme.